General Naird and his Space Force team have been called for an inquiry regarding the altercation that took place between American and Chinese astronauts on the lunar surface. Tony, who is addicted to social media, doesn't want to give up his phone. The hearing is about why General Naird refused to retaliate against the Chinese after they desecrated the American flag on the moon. We see a flashback where Naird and his team are detained by General Kick. Due to this, Dr. Mallory gets highly stressed out and has a meltdown on Brad. After coming back from the moon, Captain Angela is experiencing some gravity-related issues. At the same time, everyone starts sharing their trip problems with Angela. She tells that traveling on Earth and going to the moon are completely different. Naird's team is considering lying at the hearing because General Kick is sure to lie against them, but Naird tells everyone not to lie at all. Meanwhile, Brad thinks it's an inside joke and winks at Naird. Before the committee, General Kick argues that Naird shouldn't lead Space Force because he wears size 8 shoes and has little feet. Mallory is called inside and questioned. Listening to the questions, he becomes very stressed and argues that humans haven't evolved much from the Neanderthals. Tony is going crazy without his mobile phone, and everyone is annoyed by his obsession with social media. Meanwhile, Tony finds out that Angela and Dr. Chan are secretly dating. When Tony is called inside, he argues that Naird is stronger than any leader on Earth, and with him as the leader, America will be safe. The committee is not so sure about it. Up to this point, the hearing is not going in favor of Naird. Erin goes before the hearing committee and accidentally talks about her father's problems with sleep terrors, and about the time when he left her behind in prison after visiting her mother, etc. Now the committee thinks that Naird is not very competent for the job. If Naird is found guilty, he will lose his job and go to prison, just like his wife. Naird calls his wife. She tells everyone that she is rising within the ranks of prison inmates and now become a gang member. Naird and his team start a chair run competition to pass the time. After completing the interviews, the hearing committee draws the conclusion that Naird is unstable, indecisive, and potentially treasonous. Listening to this, Naird argues that he sure has some faults, but he believes that he has made all the right decisions regarding Space Force and the astronauts under his command. After hearing this, the hearing committee gives a final verdict. According to the verdict, General Kick has to retire from his position. Space Force will remain under the command of General Naird, but there will be budget cuts. Also, Naird has been given 5 months to work on the original mission of the Space Force and prove himself. Naird gives the good news to everyone. The reason the committee ruled in his favor was because his team told about the good characteristics of him and that he is the perfect leader to lead Space Force. Washington cuts half of the budget for Space Force. Mallory is afraid because he now has to cancel an already launched March mission due to a lack of funds. Meanwhile, Dr. Chan and his team analyze various data to figure out if Captain Angela is into him or not. Erin looks at the data chart and tells Chan that he is overthinking. Tony trains the astronauts to tell the press that there was a brief communication breakdown, and after that, Chinese and American astronauts work together to return back home safely. But in reality, there was an altercation and both nations destroyed each other's lunar habitats. Except for Captain Angela, all the other astronauts believe that the moon is flat like a pizza. With no other option, Tony tells them that only Angela will meet the press. The official from Washington informs Naird that he has to cancel the March mission. Naird tries to tell Dr. Mallory but hesitates. Captain Angela alone appears before the press and stumbles on questions. She gets a flashback of the clash in the lunar habitat. After the moon mission, Angela is having difficulties adjusting to Earth life. Tony gives her an earpiece so that he can guide her during the interviews. A little birdie told Dr. Mallory that Washington is looking for a replacement for General Naird. Mallory calls Naird outside and gives him the news. Naird gets very angry. Naird also gives Mallory the news about the cancellation of the March mission. Listening to this, Mallory freaks out and repeatedly hits a nearby vehicle. Now Mallory and Naird have to inform the astronaut, who has already completed half the journey to March, about the cancellation of the mission. Mallory and Naird try to tell the astronaut but both hesitate to give the bad news. Meanwhile, Tony relays words to Captain Angela's earpiece during her interview. After being called a hero, Angela gets agitated and tells the reporter that she is just doing her job like everyone else, and the real hero is the people who make a positive change in other people's lives. After the interview, Captain Angela is trending again on social media. Naird hosts a festival at the Space Force headquarters to boost morale. The president wants Naird to strike a treaty with the Chinese, as the space race has become the new Cold War. Naird assures that he has everything under control and is determined to crush them. Chan and Tony train Naird on how to bow while meeting the Chinese delegates. They advise him to bring his daughter, Erin, as Chinese parents love to brag about their children. The Chinese delegates arrive at the Space Force base, wearing cowboy hats. Chan sees his competition, Dr. Lim, who is a Chinese astronaut that Captain Angela met on the moon mission. Mallory shows off photos of all Americans who have stepped foot on the moon, but the Chinese scientists believe they are all actors. Angela asks Dr. Lim if he is having any issues after returning from the moon, but he denies having any issues and acts as if he doesn't know the American astronauts he met in the lunar habitat. Naird struggles to eat traditional Chinese food with chopsticks, and while picking up food, he mistakenly drops it in his wine. Mallory introduces a former astronaut who has set his feet on the moon, but the Chinese scientist doesn't believe him and argues that the astronaut is a good Hollywood actor. This leads to an altercation between Mallory and Dr. Zhang, and they start pushing the dining table. Naird and the Chinese general apologize to each other for the behavior of their respective scientists. The Chinese general invites Naird for a drink and to discuss about sharing lunar resources. He plans to get Naird drunk and give him the short end of the deal. The team gives Naird their individual hacks to keep him from getting too drunk and being taken advantage of. Naird asks Brad to give Erin a signal so she can take him out of there when he gets too drunk. Naird and the general start to take shots of a special Chinese drink brought by the general and discuss sharing the lunar resources. They are starting to get tipsy. Naird talks about the future generation and prosperity and makes a 50-50 sharing deal with the Chinese for the lunar resources. Brad notices that Naird is super drunk and tells Erin to take him out of there. The Chinese general also becomes super drunk and falls over.